The gavel came down at 9:14 in the morning, and the crowd laughed before the echo died. $90. That was what Eldon Pruitt had paid. $90 for a salvage lot the auctioneer himself had described as a junk safety deposit unit pulled from a building that hadn't been a bank since Eisenhower was alive. The unit was 3 feet wide, 4 feet tall, and it had come out of the Caldwell Federal Savings and Loan on Merchant Street in Harwick, Boone County, West Virginia. Pulled from a wall on October 3rd, 1979. Loaded onto a flatbed and driven to a salvage yard where it sat for 8 months before somebody decided to auction it alongside 2 broken vault doors, a teller cage, and 40 linear feet of dark oak countertop. Ronald Sipes laughed the loudest. He was the branch manager of the new First National on Route 7, a tall man, 6'2", wide through the shoulders, who wore a camel-colored sport coat every day regardless of season and kept his hair oiled back from center part. He had a habit of adjusting his cufflinks when he spoke, as if the motion helped him think. He did not buy anything at the auction. He was there because his bank had been asked to appraise the contents, and he had declared there were no contents worth appraising. He said, loud enough for 2 rows of people to hear, "Pruitt just spent $90 on a tin box that hasn't been opened since it was welded shut." The crowd did what a crowd does. They agreed because a man in a camel coat said it first. Eldon Pruitt said nothing. He was standing 4 feet from Sipes when the comment was made, and he did not turn around. He pulled a folded paper from his breast pocket, checked the lot number written there, checked the tag on the unit. He checked each one twice. Then he walked to find the salvage yard's pickup man to arrange transport. The unit was olive green under decades of grime, approximately 42 pounds, with a dial mechanism on its face that had been painted over at least once, maybe twice. Everyone else had seen a deadlock. Pruitt had seen something else. The paint on the dial was a different shade than the paint on the body, slightly brighter. Someone had repainted the dial after the body was already old. That meant someone had been at this lock more recently than the unit's manufacturer. Someone had come back to it, or tried to. It was 41 degrees that morning in Harwick. Low gray sky. The auction was held in a gravel lot behind the salvage warehouse, and by 9:30, most people were back in their cars with the heat running. Eldon Pruitt loaded the unit himself, strapping it to the bed of his truck with 2 cargo straps, the way he always did, making sure nothing would shift on the drive home. Eldon Pruitt was 61 years old that October, though most people guessed older from the hand alone. His hands were the color of old cedar, and they moved slowly but without hesitation, the way a man's hands move when he has been doing the same careful work for 4 decades. He stood 5'8" on a good day, slight through the chest. With steel gray hair he kept short and a small scar above his left eyebrow from a spring latch that had failed on him in 1952. He had spent 39 years as a locksmith. Not the kind who cut keys at a hardware counter. The kind who understood mechanisms the way a doctor understands bones from the inside out. He had learned the craft from his uncle, Virgil Pruitt, who had run the only lock shop in Boone County from 1931 until 1968, and who had once opened a Mosseler bank vault for the county sheriff using nothing but a length of stiff wire and 2 days of patience. Eldon had worked on post office lock banks. He had worked on federal building security hardware. In 1961, the state had hired him to rekey every lock in the Boone County courthouse, and he had finished the job 3 days ahead of schedule and charged them $40 less than his estimate. He had never been publicly recognized for this and would have been embarrassed by either. What the modern world had done to his craft was a thing he did not spend much time discussing. Electronic keypads, card readers, combination systems that could be reset from a corporate office in another state. He understood why they existed. He did not believe they knew the buildings they lived in. A lock, in Eldon's understanding, was not a wall. It was a conversation between a maker and the person meant to open it. When you learn to read that conversation, you learn something about both parties. He had learned a long time ago that the most interesting locks were the ones other people had given up on. Ronald Sipes had been branch manager of First National on Route 7 for 6 years. Before that, he had managed a savings and loan in Morgantown, and before that, he had sold insurance. He was 44 years old and had never in his professional life needed to understand how a lock worked. What he understood was depreciated assets, salvage values, and the body language of a room. The body language of the room at the Harwick salvage auction had told him that the junk safety deposit unit was worth less than the flatbed space it occupied. He had signed paperwork to that effect for the auction house. A formal assessment on First National letterhead stating that Lot 47, described as 1 Salvage Safety Deposit Storage Unit, Caldwell Federal Origin, estimated manufacture date 1941, contained no verifiable financial instruments and no assets of recoverable value. He had not opened it. He had looked at it for approximately 3 minutes, noted the condition of the exterior, noted the fused dial mechanism, and made his determination. When word got back to him on October 4th that Eldon Pruitt had paid $90 for it, he made a remark at the Rotary Club lunch that became the most quoted thing said in Harwick that month. He called it Pruitt's $90 education. The men at the table laughed. It was the kind of line that travels because it sounds true and because the man who says it is wearing a camel coat. Now, if you have ever seen a man who knew exactly what he was doing get laughed out of a room by a man who did not, subscribe to this channel. Because the people who stay for stories like Eldon Pruitt's are exactly who this channel was built for. The Caldwell Federal Savings and Loan had opened its doors on March 14th, 1941, on the corner of Merchant and Sycamore in Harwick, West Virginia. It was a 2-story brick building, unremarkable from the outside, built by a contractor named Fenwick Aldridge, who had also built the post office 2 blocks north and the school gymnasium on Pine. The interior had 17 individual safety deposit boxes in its main vault room and a secondary wall unit. The unit Eldon now owned, tucked behind a false panel in the manager's office. The false panel had been part of the original design, not hidden for criminal reasons. Hidden because the bank's first manager, a man named Cecil Aldous Brandt, had believed that private clients deserved private access. Cecil Brandt had managed Caldwell Federal from its opening until November 1943, when he enlisted in the Army at the age of 47, lying about his age to do it. He came back from the Pacific in 1945 with a pronounced limp in his left leg and a manner of speaking that was slower and more deliberate than anyone remembered. He returned to the bank. He resumed his position. He managed Caldwell Federal until 1957, when a health matter forced him to step back. He died in March of 1959. The secondary wall unit had never been listed in the bank's formal inventory. It appears on no regulatory document. When Caldwell Federal was absorbed by a regional chain in 1961, the acquisition team inventoried the main vault. The manager's office was cleaned out and repainted. The false panel was either overlooked or not known about. The unit behind it sat undisturbed. When the building was condemned and demolished in 1979, a construction worker pulling paneling found the unit and flagged it to the salvage company. It had been behind that wall for 22 years without a single person knowing it was there. Eldon knew the Caldwell Federal building. He had replaced 2 exterior door locks there in 1954 at the request of Cecil Brandt, who had been particular about which locksmith he used. Eldon had met the man twice. He remembered a short man, compact, with careful eyes, who had shaken his hand at the end of the job and said, "Some things are only as safe as the person who knows about them." He had thought about that line occasionally over the years. He thought about it again on the drive home. He drove the 17 miles from Harwick to his property outside Orton at 38 miles an hour with the radio off. The sky had gone from gray to the pale white that comes before sleet, and the fields on either side of Route 9 were brown and flat and still. The cargo straps held. He checked them in the mirror twice. By the time he pulled into his gravel drive, it was past noon, and 3 of his neighbors already knew about the auction. His neighbor Harlan Goss called across the fence and said, "I heard you bought that old bank junk." Eldon said he had. Harlan shook his head. "Be cheaper to heat your house with it than open it." Eldon thanked him for the thought and went inside. He ate a bowl of soup. He changed into his work clothes. He did not hurry. The workshop was attached to the back of the house, 12 by 16 feet, with a single bare bulb on a pull chain and a workbench that ran the full length of the north wall. Eldon brought the unit in on a hand truck, set on the bench, and stood back to look at it for a full minute without touching it. He pulled the stool from under the bench and sat down close enough to see the grain of the paint without his glasses. He put his glasses on anyway. He laid out his tools in order. Not the full kit. 6 pieces, a lamp with a flexible neck, a mechanic stethoscope from 1948, 2 tension wrenches of different widths, a cam follower probe, and a soft cloth. He set a timer and turned off the radio, though the radio had been off all day. The dial mechanism was a 5-tumbler system, consistent with bank hardware of the early 1940s, manufactured likely by Diebold or a Diebold licensee. The repainting of the dial, the thing no one else had noticed at the auction, indicated someone had tried the combination and missed, and possibly tried to erase evidence of the attempt. The paint was brushed on clumsily. Not a professional, someone anxious. His first attempt was methodical. He applied slight rotational pressure with a narrower tension wrench and began feeling for the gates through the stethoscope. The first 2 tumblers gave themselves up inside 20 minutes. The third resisted. He set down the wrench and sat back. He applied penetrating oil to the seam of the dial housing. Not a lot. A careful line. He let it sit for an hour and 40 minutes, drinking 2 cups of coffee and rereading the newspaper he'd already read that morning. His second attempt found the 3rd tumbler. The 4th followed it. The 5th did not. The mechanism had a false gate on the 5th tumbler, a design feature Diebold had used in their higher security units, meaning this was not a standard public deposit box. This had been a private commission. He sat with that fact for a moment before continuing. He did not rush. He was 61 years old, and his back hurt, and the bulb above him put out a yellow light that did not help his eyes. He adjusted the flexible lamp and began again. The 3rd attempt took 40 minutes. He found the true gate on the 5th tumbler at 6:17 in the evening, and when the mechanism turned, the sound it made was not a click or a bang. It was a soft, releasing exhale, the way a door sounds when weather stripping finally gives. He felt it more than heard it. He did not open it right away. He set the tools down on the cloth. He took his glasses off and put them back on. He sat on the stool and looked at the face of the unit, which had done its job for longer than most men live, and he thought about Cecil Brandt standing in a doorway in 1954 shaking his hand and saying what he had said. He could smell it through the seam before he opened it fully. Cold air, old paper, a faint mineral quality like the inside of a stone well. He opened the door the rest of the way. He looked before he reached in. The interior was divided into 2 sections. The upper section held a flat metal box, approximately 14 inches by 10, sealed with a small hasp. The lower section held a document tube, brass, tarnished to near black, and beside it, a small canvas pouch cinched with a leather cord. He sat for a full 3 minutes and looked. He took the canvas pouch first. It contained 11 Liberty silver dollars dated between 1921 and 1935. He set each one on the cloth. He counted them twice. They were in near mint condition, the kind of coins a man puts away not for what they are worth, but for what they represent. The document tube opened with moderate pressure. Inside, a property deed. Boone County, dated June 9th, 1939. A parcel of 42 acres on Ryman Creek, transferred to a name Eldon did not recognize. A woman's name, Loretta Ann Voss, formerly of Charleston. He held the deed under the lamp and read it twice. The flat metal box took another 20 minutes. The hasp had its own small lock. A cabinet-style tumbler Eldon opened with a bent probe in less than 4 minutes. Inside the box was a single envelope, cream-colored, sealed. The name on the front was written in a careful, even hand, for Loretta when the time is right. Eldon did not open the envelope. He was not the one meant to open it. He picked it up and held it. The paper had the slight stiffness of old age, a gentle rigidity at the edges. He set it down on the cloth and looked at the wall of his workshop for a while. The sleet had started outside. He could hear it against the window. He had never done this job for the things he found. He had done it for the conversation inside the lock. But sometimes the conversation led somewhere else. He understood that now. He wiped his hands on his trousers. He went inside, washed his face, and made dinner. He drove to the county records office when it opened the next morning. He did not call ahead. He set the deed and the document tube on the desk of the county clerk, a woman named Patrice who had worked there for 12 years, and he explained where they had come from in as few words as possible. She looked at the deed for a long time. It took 11 days to find her. Loretta and Voss had married in 1946, changed her name, moved to Cincinnati, and outlived 2 husbands. She was 78 years old and living in a nursing facility outside the city when the county clerk's office reached her by telephone. The 42 acres on Ryman Creek had been sold by the county for back taxes in 1963, 14 years after it had been deeded to her, and 22 years before she knew she owned it. There was no recovering the land. But the deed was hers. The silver dollars were hers. And the envelope, which she read privately, alone in her room, and about which she told only the nurse who brought her dinner that night, was hers. She told the nurse it was a letter from a man she had known when she was 26. She said she had wondered about him for a long time. When Ronald Sipes heard what had been found in the unit he had assessed at 0 value, he said very little. Word came to him at the Rotary Club, and the men at the table were quiet in a way they had not been when he had made his joke. He resigned from his position at First National 11 months later, citing personal reasons. He moved to a city further north where no one knew about the camel coat or the joke or the formal letter on bank letterhead that said there was nothing inside. A copy of the deed was framed and hung in the Boone County Historical Society in Harwick beside a photograph of the Caldwell Federal Building taken in 1943. Eldon Pruitt's name is on the placard beneath the frame. Below it, for words he told the Historical Society director when she asked him how he had done it. He said, "I read what it said." He went back to work the same afternoon the county called to confirm the items had been received. There was a broken deadbolt on a farmhouse outside Orton that needed his attention. He drove out there at 38 miles an hour with the radio off, and he fixed it in under an hour, and he charged the farmer what the job was worth. The envelope was never discussed publicly. That was right. Some conversations are only meant for one person. Ask yourself this. If you had been in that gravel lot on that October morning, and a man in a camel coat had told you the thing in front of you was worthless, would you have trusted the coat, or would you have looked at the lock? Eldon Pruitt looked at the lock. He had been doing it for 39 years, and he was not done yet.